So, hi everybody, this is Dan Roos of Openly Disruptive, and this is Hands On Ideas 9, Assistive Messaging. And joining us um, is Chad Ruble. And Chad is an interesting guy. He's into a lot of hacks and a lot of making. But what's I think what we wanted to talk about was a project that we first saw that he did, where he was using some Connect and Arduino hacks and other things as a way to help people that had communication and um, uh, other kinds of handicaps as far as interacting with technology to help them actually communicate, so to give them some tools. And a real close to home kind of story for Chad, but it's got a great angle on it. And just as a reminder, the goal of this is to talk about, what inspired. Chad's going to talk about what inspired him. He's going to talk a little bit about what he's done about that inspiration, and then he's going to talk a little bit about how you can build off of his work. And he's already shared that there's a lot of information on his blog, and we're going to post his presentation right after the webcast is over, and a video archive of it will be available shortly. But Chad, just let's get us started. So you're in the New York area. Are you? What part of New York are you in?
I'm in Brooklyn, Dan.
You're in Brooklyn, okay. And so kind of set up a little bit about what your background is, and what you first set out to kind of play with here.
Right, so I'm going to go ahead and, Dan, thanks for giving me the chance to talk about this. My background is in journalism. I'm a non-engineer. I didn't study computer science. I didn't study electronics. I've always been kind of intrigued by it and interested, but just took other paths. And about 12 years ago, my mom, actually it was about 13 years ago, my mom had a really serious stroke. Left her paralyzed on one side, so her right hand, when she was right-handed, was really hard for her to. She couldn't move it. It's essentially paralyzed, and she had very significant aphasia. And aphasia is basically, a lot of people aren't familiar with it. Uh, it's it's a disability with language. So the brain's ability to process language has been hindered in one way or another. And there's a broad range of aphasia. It can be as sort of subtle as somebody maybe stuttering a little bit, or it can be somebody who has a very limited working vocabulary of, say, maybe even less than 10 words, depending on the person. So my mom is on the more extreme end of the spectrum. People with aphasia completely understand what's going on around them. They can understand. They have varying degrees of understanding language, but they can't communicate, whether it's through the written word or the spoken word, and or they have some sort of difficulty around that. So my mom, this was obviously a big event in our life, and it's been about 13 years, so it's not such a crisis anymore. It's more just sort of like, how can we work with what we've got. And I've learned a lot about aphasia along the way, and I've learned a lot about communication. And a lot about assistive technology. And it really became my inspiration to sort of get under the hood with technology, learn what I could to sort of start doing things on my own. And I'll get into that a little bit as well. Um, Dan, do you want me to just kind of continue forward?
Yeah, that's great. But I think it's interesting that you didn't really have a tech background, but you started playing with this. And had you ever had you ever played with tech as a kid, or I mean, growing up, or is this really something that this was really what drove you to get involved in this?
I programmed in high school with on a Commodore 64 with BASIC,
Hmm.
and I did some basic programs. I remember that by the time I got to college, programming felt really complicated to me. And in order to do things that were interesting, sort of beyond, 25 lines of basic or 100 lines of basic, it was something that wasn't. It felt a little bit. It felt difficult and it felt intimidating. And certainly if it came down to programming a microchip, my friends who were studying engineering, they had to do, machine code in order to talk to the microchip. And that to me, I said, maybe I'm just going to go study film and, and history. Even though I really was interested, it just felt a little bit out of reach, to be honest. And maybe that was a matter of not kind of connecting with the right teacher or the right technology or the right moment. But I think what happened really after exploring what technology was available to my mom was I was really frustrated. I was like, surely, surely we can do something that's easier and better, and surely we can do that. And when I talked to developers, 13 years ago, 12 years ago, 8 years ago, the story was, oh yeah, that's sure we can help you, and that'll cost you, $100,000,
Right.
which obviously I didn't have. And it became kind of a different conversation. I thought, it just can't be that complicated, some of this stuff. And it became a lot less complicated in the last, certainly in the last 5 years. Web programming languages have libraries, and third parties make hosting possible. I don't need to buy my own web server and stick it on a rack and host it, and I don't need to spend that kind of money. I can use Heroku and use their servers, and I can use Amazon Web hosting for storage, and it's all kind of scalable. It's all really inexpensive, and that's on the website. And we'll get into the other projects, but everything kind of got a little bit easier at the same time that I got more motivated, and I had a real motivation to I had a reason to build something. It wasn't like I was an undergrad and wanted to kind of figure out a way to make some kind of cool video game. That was the people that were programming video games were really knew what they were doing. And, you know, now but I had a real reason to my mom was motivation and helping her connect with the world around her in a meaningful way, remotely and through messaging was something that I really wanted to do. And I knew that it wasn't just me, but a lot of people
But,
were craving this.
and I think what's interesting is I've talked to a few people that do user experience and user interface stuff. And when I share your story with them, they kind of say, rarely does somebody working in that area actually get to work this closely with the end user as you did, because I mean, she was your mom, and so in developing these interface tools that we're going to talk about here, that you're going to explain. You had years of understanding what her disability was and what her abilities were, and how best to serve her, and that in some ways you had a real luxury as a developer of this.
Yeah, I mean, I had the motivation, and I had like a very patient and excited and happy to work with me, user zero,
Right.
and she was the perfect guinea pig for all of these experiments along the way. It was all fun for her.
Yeah.
If it ever got frustrating, she was still spending time with. We were spending time together. It became some other way for us to it was a fun thing to do, and but you're right. Along the way, I probably logged hundreds of hours of observation, and just implicitly by being with her and working with her on all these various, iterations, um, how she interacted with different interfaces, what the interface looked like, and what different actions meant to her in her current, state.
Sure. Well, I'm going to let you. I mean, because I think if for people that are watching and they're like, all right, tell me what he actually did. So let's get to that. But
All
make
right.
sure I think it's kind of interesting to. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that if somebody was doing the interface design or the occupational therapy side of this, um, you know, um, that wasn't doing all the roles at once would certainly be interested in how you arrived at some of the decisions that you made and some of the things that you tried. But go ahead and get started and talk us through
Yeah.
it.
And hopefully, yeah, just give me a little ping or let me know when I should pause and if you want to jump
Yeah,
in with a question. But
sure,
yeah, I'll go through. And so basically, because of aphasia, she, we all have all of these different ways of communicating. Twitter, Facebook, Skype. This slide could actually be a lot more crowded. I just wanted to be represented here, but all my mom could really use was the phone. And that's amazing to think that we're all so used to texting people, and we're not really using the phone these days very much. So she was getting increasingly locked out by what I call the accessibility digital divide. It's a portion of the digital divide. People who just simply can't use certain tech and certain social networking communications and texting. So all of her friends who are, she's in her 60s, as her friends kind of were getting more, and in the last 13 years, she had a Hotmail account, and that was like a big deal 13 years ago. And so her friends all in the last 13 years have ratcheted down their phone use and ratcheted up her friends and family and her kids, myself included, and my sisters. We all ratcheted down our phone use. We've ratcheted up our texting, our social networks, our Instagramming, our how we share and quickly ping each other and connect throughout the day. So we had to, she could call me, and that was great. But what would happen when she called me was it would be a matter of and I'll get to what I'm showing in a second. But she would call me, and it would be this kind of guessing game, and sometimes it would be really unclear as to, oh, she just wants to say hi, and that was kind of in the course of because of her disability, she would call and say hello, and I'd say hello, is there a problem? And yes, but yes meant no at that particular moment. And for all I knew, she was, on the ground having a major, some kind of major problem. But, usually I'm at 99% of the time when she called me, she just wanted to say hi. I'm thinking about you. And she just wanted to let me know that her television remote wasn't working. And I had to get over there and fix it so that she could kind of get organized with it. And, but in the course of an average day, going from a meeting or a series of meetings during a work day, I'd get a call from her, and then I'd miss it, then I'd worry, and I'd call her back, and I wouldn't know what was happening, and suddenly like my anxiety level would go up because of her situation. And all she really wanted to do was just call me and say hi. So I wanted her to be able to reach out to me. I wanted her to send me texts. I wanted her to just ping me, shoot me a note. And so a lot of the stuff that she works with, and that's what I'm showing. There's two screen grabs here. One is something called Lingraphica. The other is something called Proloquo2Go. These are kind of the industry leaders in visual icon-based communication tools. And Lingraphica is expensive, and it doesn't, but like it costs thousands of dollars, and it's essentially a MacBook with one layer of software on it. And that software was developed significantly, from what I can gather, like 15 years ago. And they've done some development since. And I don't want to talk out of turn, but the interface I found lacking, and the design was just, it felt like it was a lot of like stock icons that nobody had bothered to refresh. And one of the kind of ongoing themes for me, as I noticed all of her assistive tech, was that assistive tech is kind of ugly and utilitarian, and it doesn't have to be. It's frustrating to look at. My mom's an artist. She has a really strong visual sense, and she would look at these sort of, whether it's a stick figure or a line drawing, and while yes, that's very functional for a broad base audience, it wouldn't be that hard to make it maybe a little bit more attractive or a little bit more appealing. So Proloquo2Go is these are both great programs. I'm not they were expensive. Proloquo2Go is like $180. They have a good iPad app. There are a lot of people that use it to communicate. It's really opened the doors with certainly with the iPad and the iPod Touch. It's opened doors for people who have trouble communicating to be able to walk out into the world and say something, that express something that they couldn't before. And whether it's an autistic child or somebody who has aphasia or somebody with some sort of other nonverbal speech disorder, these are great programs. They're great for practicing, and they're amazing for building sentences when you're in the room. None of these programs, and there's probably about 4 to 6 others that do similar things. I call them sort of picture board apps. None of these picture boards are programmable picture boards. None of them are networked. None of them allow that message to go from that computer or that iPad out in an email message or out in a text message or out onto Facebook. You were locked into the ecosystem of the app. And that to me was really frustrating because I thought, well, I'm not with my mom, for hours and days at a time. She's got other people in her life, but I don't only want to hear those sentences when I'm in person with her. I want to hear them and see what's going on just kind of throughout the day. So I had a need. I had a frustration with what existed, and B, I had a need. What these apps do really well is they allow people to take pictures and create sentences, and those sentences are then generated verbally. So they will have a text-to-speech generator that creates these sentences and speaks them out. And in a therapy setting, somebody may take those sentences and repeat them over and over, which is wonderful because then the therapist doesn't have to repeat them over and over. The person can practice on their own. So there's tons of value in these, but I found them to be expensive. The design was lacking, and they weren't networked. That was the big one. And I thought, gosh, how hard can it be to network one of these things and get the messages from my mom's place out into the world, because she has friends all over the world. She's got friends in Asia, she's got friends in London, she's got friends in California, New York, everywhere. So I began tinkering, and my first iteration of this is something I called Iconicate. They're all kind of different named, but I based this. I used Arduino. I built this box. I wired it up with 2 potentiometers and one arrow pointed to groovy or foggy or silly or mellow, and the other one told me the degree of that. And there were like 7 variations across the dial. So 7 times 7 was 49 different messages had been programmed into these 2 dials. And then when she pressed the red button, it would automatically send an email to me and my sisters and 2 of her friends. So for the first time, mom was able to kind of send an email with this. And this was basically would go from this Arduino project into a processing sketch. The processing sketch sent the email. And that was, for anybody who's a tinkerer, this is like a variation of like intro to Arduino and intro to processing with an email library. And it didn't take me that long with some patient, assistance from people who knew what they were doing to rig this. And
It's interesting to me in looking at this, Chad, what the messages in this first pass that you wanted to let her be able to send, none of them were, I need help with the TV, I need help with, the power is that, nothing that was functional. This was all about establishing a human connection. This was sending a mood. These are emoticons.
Yeah, I mean, this initially had 3 pages to it, and one page was feelings, and the second page was places. So it was like I went to or I'm going to. It was 2 options, and then the third page was people. So I spoke to or I saw. It was like really, really basic choices that we had, but I didn't have like I need the remote button. In fact, if there was one other button I would have added the I pressed the wrong button on the remote and you need to fix and inevitably it's because she just changed the input on the TV and I have to just change the input back to cable from her DVD player. And I can't tell you, that's probably like the number of hours spent for anybody who ends up being like the Geek Squad in their family. It's mostly just because it's the wrong input on the TV. So I should have had, that would have been a great button to add, Dan.
So then you said this was kind of the first version, and this was Arduino,
right?
And going to processing to actually send the message. But this was a pretty low tech and pretty a selective way of communicating. So selective, predetermined, one of these possible options.
Yeah, and I would say that most of it would fall under the heading of pretty selective and predetermined. This had what I wanted to explore here was, what is it like to just communicate with 2 dials and a button? The keyboard was like Mount Everest. I was like, there's no way we're going to tackle the keyboard, but maybe mom can tackle 2 dials and a button and figure out how to use this thing. And one of the learnings of this was that the physicality of the interface was actually quite satisfying. And if I were to really iterate on, if there were some iterations that would have been interesting to try, one would have been these knobs actually just spin; they don't have stops. But I would
Mm-hmm.
probably want to put stops at the various
Mm-hmm.
areas. But the other thing that was really key was the feedback. So with this project, the emails went out, and on the screen, so then with the processing sketch, because she was just switching these things and pressing the button, the later version had when the dials turned, the icons changed on the screen, and the
Mm-hmm.
message was being formed. So as she turned the dials, she could change the icons, and they were all appearing on the screen. And then when she pressed the button, it said, "Hey, your message is sent." And so when I added that, it was a lot easier. It was all about responsiveness, like because it was just this is just otherwise just a box, and she needed some kind of feedback response. And any UI or UX expert would say, that sort of feedback response is pretty critical.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the physicality of it was something I really wanted to explore, and almost the analog nature of the dials and the buttons was something that was really interesting to me, and something that I think is underexplored in sort of this age of tablet. We're all kind of keyed up about the tablet. It's great. It's easy. I'm keyed up about it. But physical interfaces are something that are really worth exploring, especially for non-traditional users or non-mainstream users.
Well, they embody a lot of. That's interesting because physical interface embodies a lot of feedback in it itself.
Right.
So that doesn't have to be added as a script or some other bit of animation to characterize a swipe or whatever. The swipe functionality is built into the nature of physics. It's
Right.
interesting.
I'm not just I'm turning. I'm physically turning something, and it's the arrow's changing.
Yeah. So you built on
Um,
this.
so I built on this, and I moved on. This project was really fun. I moved away from the physical and into the gestural, and this was as a result of working with. So NYU has something called the Interactive Technology Program, and it's basically engineering school for artists and art school for engineers, and they have a lot of people that are really bright playing with cutting edge technology in really unusual ways. And every summer they do a camp for adults. And it's essentially sort of a conference that people can sort of say, hey, I want to learn about this or that, or I want to come and attend a session. And that's how I was introduced to processing in Arduino. And it was really a matter of, some very sort of thoughtful educators who were able to sort of speak in plain English to a non-engineer to say, hey, you can program an Arduino sketch and this is how you do it. You can program a processing sketch and this is how you do it. And if you want to hack your Kinect, it's actually not that hard. Let me show you. And so that I was really excited about the Kinect when it came out, and the idea of being able to sort of separate ourselves from keyboards and the computer even one step removed was something I wanted to explore. So the Kinecticate project um, was the same kind of basis, the sort of feelings, emoticons. I intended to make other pages for it, but as I kind of went forward, we were kind of moving in different directions. But if I wanted her to really use this more frequently, and she used it a bunch, and it was really fun. The same processing sketch or library, would send emails to a select group of people, and she would one of the big problems I had with this, which is interesting and hopefully interesting, um, the way that so I used a library called Simple OpenNI, and the way that the natural user interface would recognize that there's a human being in front of the sensors, in front of the three cameras of the Kinect, sensor. Um, you had to stand in front of it and raise two arms, and that was a real problem for my mom. She couldn't stand. She could stand, but she couldn't raise her right arm. So I didn't, but I almost tried making like a cardboard cutout arm that she could hold up so that she would recognize her body. Um, now so I actually shelved this project. I wrote this whole program. It took me a while, and I got to the point where like, okay, now we need to recognize the user. And it was recognizing me because I was doing the two arms up, and had been told that you could do custom gesture recognition. There were ways of doing it, and so I looked into it and I thought, no, you can't. In order to even do the custom recognition for that iteration of the library, you needed to have two arms up. It was really frustrating,
And
and
because you weren't a coder yourself, you were using the light. It's not like you could, oh, okay, well, I can, I know how I can mod this. You didn't
yeah,
know how to.
I couldn't get deeply into the C, and really, really, you know, write the functions that would recognize things that weren't based on, you're right. So yeah, I was kind of stuck with the libraries, but I had a conversation with one guy, and he was like, "Oh, well, you should just try this. There's this bit of code that this guy was using for this, art project, and it just recognizes the gesture of raise hand." And somewhere in the 9 months that followed me giving up on this project, somewhat frustrated, but knowing that I would come back to it, and that conversation, I realized that somebody had written or somebody had blogged more extensively about the gesture recognition built into Simple OpenNI, something called gesture. Or raise hand. Raise hand was a function, and once I incorporated raise hand into the code, all my mom had to do was raise her hand, and that meant that all the other code that I wrote could be used finally. so
little
so it
little
was a matter of,
serendipitous there.
yeah, it was a really great conversation, and I called the guy and I thanked him, and it's a pretty well-known blogger. And I really don't know that it's really totally tweaked to him just what a big difference this made. I've told him a bunch of times, and he's sort of happy about it. But it's a guy named Matt Richardson, and it was another guy had used a bit of his code for an art project, and he said, "Oh, check out Matt Richardson's blog," and he had done he just blogged about it, and in fact, it was just a demonstration of that bit of code. I think it was something he was just trying to do. I thanked him for putting it up because I didn't know it was the first place I had heard about it, and I sent this to him, and he was excited that it worked, but I don't know that he was. I still don't know that he quite understands how awesome it was for me to be able to put this together and allow my mom to sort of easily send emails without her touching the keyboard. Because the two dials and a button process was great, but this was different. She could kind of sit there and control something on a screen, and it was the beginning of sort of thinking about how are we going to compose these messages. And what was key about this also as a sort of market reaction is I posted a very short video about her trying to do this, and actually independently sending her first email with this system. She and the response was phenomenal. I mean, it got it got covered in TechCrunch and CNET and a bunch of different blogs, and it got 130,000 views. And beyond just the reaction of oh, this is a cool video and someone's doing something kind of cool, it was the comments and the people that emailed me afterwards I'd like to do this, or my mom had a stroke, or my dad had a stroke, or I know somebody that's in a wheelchair and something like this might work. And I just realized that I wasn't the only person that was facing with a loved one with communication issues, and traditional interfaces just weren't working for us, and we needed some other options. And at the same time of needing other options, here we have all this new tech, all these new libraries, and all this, all these great sensors, the Kinect sensor. I mean, the idea that I could, just raise my hand and kind of move something on a screen, and it knows where my hand is. And then I can basically map out, essentially the way we compose the messages. I mapped out the grid, and depending on where the hand was, that changed what your selections were.
And it's not like this was at some big research institution. This is a toy that you buy from the store.
Exactly. And I mean, it's not more than a couple hundred lines. It's maybe 150 lines of code or something.
Really?
Maybe, and I guarantee you a smarter coder than I could probably break it down to much less than that. I had a lot of if-then statements that I could probably have
Somebody else would have
recompile.
known how to nest all that stuff really nicely, huh?
Yeah, I'm sure they would have, but I was just happy to have it work,
Yeah.
and I was kind of amazed. Look, this is like a gaming device that is helping my mom send email, and so I would go out during the day, and I would on my phone get an email from my mom. I'm feeling really happy, or I'm feeling groovy, or whatever, and it was really fun. It was just a pure novelty of her being able to sort of, and she knew she was communicating with me because I'd come home, or I'd visit her and I'd say, hey, or I'd call her and I'd say, hey, so you're feeling groovy. And that was just really fun for us. There was like a whole sort of 2 or 3 month period of time where we were just really having a lot of fun with this. And I didn't even really expand the pages. It was really just, I always planned on it. I was going to add the people and the feelings and other kind of message composition abilities
Hmm.
to it. But it kind of worked and it got us excited. And what came out of this was the realization that I wanted to that there were a lot of other people out there that wanted something similar. The idea of kind of commercializing a Connect-based communication platform, like someone's got to have like a computer or an Xbox and a Connect sensor, and they have to have the wherewithal to like, if it's to load it all up and get somebody set up with it. It's a pretty involved process, and so it my next version was tablet based. So this is on her iPad. This was a way, and you can see I did have all of the that's an icon of me, and then people and places, and that's like the feed, the little radio antenna there. And
Hmm.
so all my screen grabs are this is just page one, but the places and the people added a whole other dimension, and mom was able to use it really easily. And the iPad's really good at keeping a network connection. I didn't have to worry about I'm running I don't want to like one of the problems with the Connect system, because of the way it was kind of jimmied together, was I was running processing all day on my laptop with the Connect sort of live, and you know it wasn't an ideal situation to just sort of have running all day. But my
Right.
mom could click onto a web-based thing, tap onto her tablet, and compose a message and send it. And what I realized is that would be a really easy thing to make available to the dozens of people who had said, "Wow, I wish I could help my aunt, uncle, dad, brother, son."
Hmm.
And I thought, well, let me play around with this. So we had a lot of success with this web-based tablet-based version of this communication system. And what was great about this communication system was that not only could I get these messages by email, I could put all these messages up on a web page. So I wasn't getting 15 emails a day. I could just go to that page and look at my mom's feed before seeing her and know that what kind of day she had had or what she had done, or just know a little bit more. And when somebody has communication difficulties, it's a little bit of context goes a long way, Dan,
Hmm.
because you don't you know I'm coming in, and if I know that she saw a movie, we're already like we're a half hour ahead of where we would have been had I just come in totally cold. Like, how was your day? She might have been able to say movie at that moment. She might have been able to point to something in the newspaper, might have worked, but I walked in just sort of confident, kind of having a sense for it. It was a wonderful thing. So we played with this a lot, and because I also knew that I could customize this a lot more easily and get this in the hands of people who needed to communicate with their loved ones a
Talk a little
lot
bit
more
about
easily.
these blue bars to the right. What is?
So that's amount.
Okay.
So as you tapped on your little radio signal amount,
Uh-huh.
it's either a little or a lot, and as you tapped on it, it would change the I'm feeling very happy, a little, somewhat frustrated, very extremely frustrated.
Gotcha.
And so that was your sort of modifier. Every page had its own modifiers. So the people page had, instead, now I had expanded. The people page on the Iconicate had two modifiers. I spoke to, or I saw. The people page now was, I spoke to, I saw, I want to hear from, I'm thinking about. It was four different things.
Mm.
And then I expanded the same thing along with the places. It wasn't I went to or I'm going to. It's like I want to go to, I'm thinking about, I went to, I'm going to. I was able to kind of expand on that. And then I actually, when I, so I looked at this, I took a hard look at this, and this, I did all the front end work myself. The back end work was in Python, and I had a friend help me out with that because that was a little bit beyond some of the web stuff with the sort of Python database, and was a little was beyond what I could do quickly. And we built this prototype, and we played around with this for about, I don't know, easily like 4 to 6 months, pretty actively. And when it became clear that this was like a new way for us to communicate, I knew, and her friends in her aphasia group wanted to use it, and other people were hearing about it. I had her friends who were out of town that were really enjoying getting these messages and enjoying looking at this page, because they would, if you're in if you're 1,000 miles away and you need to call someone with aphasia, if you know that they saw a movie yesterday or they went to the park yesterday, you can call and say, how was, you went to the park, that's great. I went to the park yesterday. Instead of like, what'd you do yesterday? It's just sort of like, you avoid those, it just gives you that little bit of context to help a conversation.
Okay.
So I decided to just ramp up and make this available to people for free with a product called Tapgram. And so we did a lot of work around the design of the icons. It was like I was tired of ugly assistive icons. So really, with a gal I know who's an illustrator, she did a great job. This woman, Yana Beresheva. And so not only were we able to easily create these boards are all customizable. It's basically like a really simple social network, so that on this thing, my kids would then have these interactions with my mom that I wasn't even part of. So my mom would post something, and then my son Charlie would post a reply, or my daughter would post a reply, and I wasn't suddenly, like, when you're a parent and you're not part of that conversation, it's kind of a cool moment when your kids are independently communicating without you really being part of it, and messaging each other. It was a really fun moment. And this was I put this up because my son sent that he was feeling sad, and I think something, and I don't know what he was actually sad. And I thought, oh, well, that's a bummer. But my daughter sent him a smiley face, and knowing her as well as I do, I knew that smiley face wasn't a hey, feel better smiley face. That was a I'm happy that you're sad smiley face. And
Oh,
so we was able to kind of read into her message because I knew her pretty well. But so with Tapgram, what we've been able to do that's been really interesting is it goes to email, it integrates with Facebook, and something that happened that is amazing for my mom, and for and maybe not so amazing for Tapgram, but she suddenly was able, before she started doing any of these experiments with me, before we did, and she couldn't use Facebook. It was just a mystery to her, and she would tap on ads, and none of it made any sense to her. And she couldn't type, the keyboard would come up and she couldn't type anything, and it would just, the whole thing was a mess. And after this sort of, we've been doing experimenting with this for a couple of years. She's been using Tapgram and Iconicate and the prototype of it for about 9 or 12 months. And what she gained was really surprising. She gained what I call social media fluency. And that meant that she understood what a feed was. She understood what a like was. So she had kind of a basic understanding of what she was looking at with Facebook, so that she could decode that page, that she couldn't ever decode before she used the sort of more simpler version of it. So in some ways, she kind of doesn't need it anymore. She totally does, because she needs it to put the messages together. But I see her now on Facebook, and she's able to kind of like a post that I put up, or like a picture that I put up, or try to type a comment even. And sometimes that typing is kind of clearly not what she intends to say, but sometimes it is. And it's been really surprising to see her sort of gain this fluency and allow her to connect in ways that she never was before. So now
So,
instead of
so that's
like the five,
interesting. So that's, what you're saying is that essentially, the Facebook or whatever interface is so intuitive that's meant to be, that architecture is what you get from interacting with it. There's no, it, it's purely an experiential way to get that conceptual model. So until she was able to actually experience it herself, she wasn't ever going to understand the model. None of it made sense because you didn't know what were interactive elements and passive elements, and all of that stuff until you could actually just play with it.
totally, and you couldn't play with it because it was too confusing. And to top off her, she didn't grow up with web browsing, so even just like a back button is confusing. You have to kind of understand what that is,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that sort of took time. And I think we forget sometimes when we see how stuff's just kind of easy. A lot of basic web stuff that we do is really easy, but to people who are either from a different generation or just not sort of as, maybe they have a disability or maybe they're just not technologically inclined, that there's conceptually a lot going on when we're just scanning the web and looking at a feed. And she was able to kind of break it down and say, oh, if I this is a reply, oh, this is like a thread. And she got it. She finally kind of got it. And it was it's pretty cool that this project has led to her becoming fluent in digital media in a way that she never was before. It's
Mm-hmm.
really cool that she can use Tapgram to compose messages, which are then posted on Facebook. We added this really cool thing where if one of her friends who's not on Tapgram but on Facebook likes one of her posts, that like appears in her response feed. So she gets that feedback even though she's not in both places. If she's only in Tapgram that moment, she's going to get that like. And that feedback loop from her friends, she gets really excited. She really enjoys it when she posts something and her friends like it and her friends respond and her friends send pictures, and it's been really an amazing thing to watch.
So talk about, because we're starting to run out of time here, but talk a little bit about where this is going. And so Tapgram, how many people are using it? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a firm sense of like active daily users yet, but I have hundreds of people who have signed up for it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 500 plus accounts that have been created, and I get a decent fraction of that in traffic. So I'm guessing, anywhere from 20 to 100 active daily users right now. We've only been launched for 3 or 4 months with no marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what's been really cool about Tapgram are the letters that I get from a mom who has an autistic son who tells me that she uses Tapgram, has customized all of his boards and her customized all of her son's boards, and after he uses it, he's more verbal. He loves to play with it, and he loves and then the dad loves to sort of get other people love to get the messages as well, and they're kind of getting this sort of new way of communicating that wasn't really possible before. There was a classroom of deaf students, all hearing impaired, and they use Tapgram on a daily basis as they inform their parents of their various success milestones throughout the day. And I wasn't even intending, I just wanted to help people who had a hard time communicating. I wasn't thinking specifically about the hearing impaired or specifically about the autistic. I was informed heavily by my mom and her experience with aphasia. But what's been really cool is that some of these users, it's really made an impact. I'm not too concerned about the numbers right now because it's really early days.
Mm-hmm.
And but what's really exciting is the impact that the meaning of some of those users, the impact that Tapgram's having on some of those users, and that's just the whole thread here has been from the beginning of my Arduino project and Connect and all of
Right.
it kind of leading up to getting
So,
this in the hands of people.
so Chad, early on you talked about, some of the early solutions when your mom first had her stroke, and, early things that you played with were not very open, so that they weren't hackable. So it was things that, it was an app that lets you create, string together stuff to, do a speech synthesis thing, but not to actually email it or to, let it be online or whatever. So have you thought about openness with Tapgram? And in other words, can people modify these if somebody has accessibility issues that are different than your mom's, so autism or whatever it is, can people modify um, how it works for that, or is it still something that's too hard to do that and it's still kind of closed?
We've it's I'm keeping it free, and that's important to me because
Mm-hmm.
I just, you know, it's this is an audience that this is my passion project, so I want
Mm-hmm.
people to use it. I want to get the feedback, and we made it customizable, so every icon and every label you can change. We're kind of locked into some phrases right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to figure out how to open that a little bit more in terms of, you know, you want to take the Tapgram basic core and you want to put it into, take it off the web and put it into a different scenario. I'd be really open to that. I haven't encountered somebody who's wanted to do that in a different way yet, but I'm, very open. If anybody's like, hey, can I do this? I try hard to work with them to make it happen. Our APIs aren't like fully developed yet. We're still kind of, ironing out some wrinkles in terms of just sort of different kinds of flow and whatnot. But uh, it's it, it's free and it's totally as customizable as I can make it now, and it'll just become hopefully more customizable.
So tell me about this. What's this image?
All right, so yeah, and I know we're wrapping up, and I'll kind of go through these last few slides pretty quick. They're a little bit more about the future. Uh, the It's the Oculus there, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
Leap. And I think that what we're going to see are these are all cool gaming and cutting edge jet interface oriented products. And what we're seeing is it's pretty fantastic. I demoed the Leap. You can get really high resolution of 10 fingers and hands. The Oculus is really cool. We're just starting to see some of the demos come out of what that is. Like the Kinect, the people that are developing these are thinking about gamers. They're thinking about major titles, video game titles, and first person shooters, and cool you know cool gaming experiences. But there will be people that are in my situation that will look at this stuff, and it doesn't take a lot to take some of what is on the cutting edge right now and apply it in a really non-traditional sense and have a huge impact. So one of the cool videos I saw recently was a 90-year-old woman trying out the Oculus, and um, she's like totally blown away. She thinks she's walking around Tuscany. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's really cool. Imagine if someone's really isolated in a nursing home and they get to take a vacation once a week. Now, all that tech is there. You know, most of what people are going to do right now with it is build an awesome gaming experience, and that's great. I'm all for that. What's really fun to think about is it's not that hard to take some of this awesome tech and apply it in really simple ways and have a huge impact. And that was what I really learned here. Is I thought, oh, the Kinect is this awesome piece of technology. It's like what? It's $100 peripheral that's packed with like what would have cost tens of thousands of dollars not
Right.
that long ago, and a bunch of great people put a bunch of libraries up, and now my mom can send an email. And maybe I'll try something with the Leap, and maybe I'll try something with augmented virtual reality. So that was kind of cool. And one of the things that I learned with there's some big themes here. We've got more people that are going to be older, and technology is just easier and easier to use and to customize. I use Arduino and processing, Web 2.0 stuff, with 3D printing. You can
Mm-hmm.
customize stuff, and it's that same thing. It's you can make a huge impact with some really simple applications of what people are doing. So I know that a lot of the people that watch your webcast are tinkers and tinkerers, and I would just say that assistive tech is you can just do some really small simple things and have just a huge impact. Whether it's like putting a different handle on a cup, or customizing a spoon, These are things that cost a lot of money, and because they're so customized, and we're just seeing the beginning of what people are going to be able to do, you know, whether it's in their garages or their basements for people with all kinds of disabilities, and that's going to affect overall new ideas and new innovations that are going to come out of it.
Chad, I think you really bring up a great point. I'm not sure that a lot of people are aware of there's a story of a little boy who was born with a skeletal muscular birth defect, and uh, was not able to use his hands in any way. And some people found out about it, and somebody, I can't remember where, but they actually took some photos and uploaded them, and somebody that was a 3D modeler that knew how to design prosthetics a continent away was able to design a prosthetic to fit that was 3D printed to give this boy prosthetic hands. Um, and Other people are doing things where somebody understands the schema that somebody with a that's got that's got some accessibility issues, that they need to interact with the world. People that are blind don't. You can't just give them a map that's in braille and have them understand that, because they experience the world as a series of events that are sequential rather than seeing things from overhead. And so you can have all these people that can be wherever and can start collaborating using some of these tools to make a huge impact, in their spare time.
I think that there are already networks of people, and I think we're just going to see that more and more. There's a company in the UK called Enabled by Design that specifically did a hackathon around people. They took people with disabilities and they partnered them with designers, 3D designers, electronics guys, and guys and gals, and people. They put like a little team together around somebody, and they created really awesome solutions that helped a guy who lives in England, and tea was really important, and they created a tea kettle handle that allowed him to pour his own tea more safely. And the story about the prosthetic hand is so moving. There's a guy also that put up rigged to connect with an Arduino system with a series of vibration motors that allowed him to walk through a building, and the vibration motors gave him sort of like radar in a sense in terms of when he was coming up by an object. And all this stuff is getting easier and cheaper and better, like by the week almost. And it's going to be really fun to see how people apply it.
So to wrap up, because we're almost at our hour, um, and I have a couple questions here, and if anybody else has one, feel free to post it or tweet it. But so your presentation is going to be on our website. The video will be on our website. The link back to your website and the link back to Tapgram. So if you just want to go straight to that, or if people want to go to your blog and follow more about how you did it. A couple of questions came up. Do you have a sense of how many people there are that are trying to live independently? I mean, how many people could we really serve and make it so that they can live independently and have a more rich life like the rest of us enjoy? Is this hundreds of people per city, thousands of people? Do you have any sense of that?
I mean, when you talk about assistive tech, you're talking about a huge range of things. And one of the reasons why it's so expensive is that it has to be so customized, and for a whole range of things, and so when you're talking about a range that broad, there are more people. So aphasia, for example, there are 1 million people with aphasia, but if you include their families, let's say there's 5 people around them. That's 5 million people who are affected by the inability to communicate in kind of a regular way.
Is that just in the U.S.?
Members.
1 million in the
That
U.S.?
would be the U.S. Yeah, so that's just the U.S.
So 1 in 300.
Right.
That's a huge number of people that we could potentially help by doing these kinds of things. And you're right that they do have to be customizable. It can't just be, oh well, Tapgram is there now. Everybody just go download that from the App Store and your problem is solved.
Right. Tapgram is good for a portion of them, and a portion of them just aren't interested in it, and a portion of them don't know that they're interested in it yet. But it's also, if you include people who have, motor function problems, and Tapgram is just a communication platform. If you're talking about motor function and prosthetics, and people have trouble with seeing and hearing, that number gets huge. And I
Mhm.
think then it gets to the point where almost everybody has somebody in their life that's affected by some kind of challenge.
Mhm.
And those challenges, more and more, once you kind of understand how easy some of this tech could be to kind of produce and customize, those challenges can be addressed on almost an individual basis, um, with the right kind of thinking. But yeah, the impact can be huge, and it's really exciting to me to think about how many people will be helped by, whether it's Arduino or whether it's Connect, or whether it's somebody that's hacked the Oculus or the Leap, or
Right.
whatever's going to happen here. It's going to be really cool.
So another question: do you know, is there anybody that is really looking into, so what you're talking about here is, how to bring those people, give them the opportunity to participate in this digital, you know, age, or, I mean, however we want to, the information age or whatever. But do you know if there's anybody that's really taking a look at, for people, for this kind of thing? Like, what would be the semantics or the linguistics or whatever would be a common core set of communication, um, almost like a grammar that people could riff off of as they needed to. Do you know if there's anybody looking at that, or is it really situational and based on each individual person's needs?
You know, the, it's very situational. And I think it's important whenever anybody's creating a solution to realize that it's very situational. There's a lot of app developers that say, "Oh, I want to create an app that helps, you know, old people make phone calls, or helps somebody, do something." But what they don't realize is that's a sliver of a sliver, and you have to get to that sliver of a sliver. Um, Everybody has different needs at different times, and they have to, connecting with those needs is difficult. There's a company I heard about called Bridging Apps, and what they've done is they've taken all of the metadata from the iTunes store, and a you can search based on themes and assistive needs and abilities, and it will create a more detailed filter than the App Store search will give you, because it
Hmm.
takes the actual sort of text data and compiles it based on these keywords. And then they've rated a lot of the things too, and put different ratings and actual reviews in. So some people, and that's Bridging Apps is really geared for, I want to say assistive tech, but it's really geared towards people with autism. So it's a huge active group that are deeply affected by tech, and can be helped by tech. Um,
In some
so
surprising
there's
ways too.
yes,
Did you see at South by Southwest the woman who programs robots to tell comedy, to do comedy?
I
Um,
missed that.
and so what she discovered is she's really using it as a way. Comedy is something that there's all kinds of subtle communication cues that are built into that you need to understand each other. So it turns out it's a really useful exercise for figuring out um, the meta side of communication, not just the words being exchanged. But so she has these humanoid looking robots that she programs, but they don't, their mouths don't move or anything like that. And they have eyes that light up and, make different shapes to kind of show expression. But just by happenstance, she does research at MIT, and she discovered that autistic children really respond to it because they can communicate with something that has a reduced set of sensory outputs. So there's fewer things to monitor, to be in conversation with a robot, and so autistic children really respond well to it.
That's fascinating.
So things like that are, I think that's the, I mean, just to kind of summarize, I mean, I think that's what's great about the space that you're in, that you're doing things, but because they're so personal and they're so individualized, you're also able to, as a maker, be really close and see these really amazing, rewarding things that you wouldn't otherwise get to see.
Yeah, there's an organization called Able Gamers that does that. Life Labs is somebody who they post a lot about cool assistive tech. Enabled by Design was the UK group that does hackathons around help ability making things more accessible. Um, I think that people are just going to enjoy their look. When you buy a 3D printer, it's great. You make your toothbrush stand, and then you make your paperweight, and then you're like, okay, what am I gonna make? I make my like 3D figure of my head, and like, but if I could help somebody I know have a prosthetic that helps them make their day a little bit better, well, that's kind of a different deal. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and ultimately that's, yeah. Once you've done the toothbrush stand and you've done those couple things, you want to make a difference, and so here's a place where people can make a difference. Can you one last thing, if regardless of where anybody's at, so you've talked about a lot of national organizations. If somebody was just local, like, hey, I'm a maker, and in my community, how would I find people to help with? Is there a type of organization they could reach out to? Would they reach out to clinics, to occupational therapists? Who would they?
Almost
How would they start doing that?
Well, almost every hospital has or larger hospitals have occupational therapists. The some will actually have assistive tech departments,
Hmm.
and or they'll certainly make referrals for assistive tech centers or experts in the area. Um, you know, Traditional assistive tech has only been sort of minimally affected by the sort of maker movement because you really need somebody to really have an understanding of the need and also the technology that's available. If I was going to make some of these products for somebody who wasn't my mom, I'd be a little bit nervous about it. It has to work, it has to be reliable, it has to have air correction. There's a whole different set of things that you have to do when you're hacking for yourself or your family and then hacking for somebody else. So it gets a little bit more complicated. But if it's just a matter of like a 3D designer wanting to print something, I would I would talk to the hospitals, and I would find sort of rehab clinics, and I you know partly because I'm partial to it, but any veterans organization would probably be a great place that there would find a range of needs that might be able to be met.
Yeah, there's some great veterans organizations, like the Mission Continues, where they're actually veterans are actually running these programs to help you know um, get people back to the swing of things in their community and interacting with people and things. So there are a lot of organizations out there like that. So those are great suggestions. Chad, thank you very much for your time
Yeah, I think
tonight. This,
what
oh, go ahead.
once once you put up a couple projects, you'll get plenty of emails.
Yeah, I bet. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for the inspiration and the great feedback. Once again, this is Hands on Ideas. We do this every month, um, and we look forward to the next conversation. I'm looking here just a moment to see who we have coming up. But Chad's information, both his presentation and the links that he's talked about, will be up on our site um, very shortly. And we appreciate it, and we can't wait to hear how things are going with Tapgram. Our next hands-on ideas presentation is May 15th, and that is magnetic launches. And that's a person that's making coil guns. Sounds very violent, but it's actually a magnetic coil to launch a projectile, similar to what people are looking at to replace rockets for getting things into space. And he's going to talk about how you can build your own coil gun. So yeah, you might want to hang out, check
Yeah, I
that out,
think I
Chad.
will.
His name's Barry Hansen. So thank you very much again, and everybody be safe out there. Take care.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye bye.